Sears. I am the Lean Coordinator for the Department of Environmental Conservation. This is part of the Lean Learning Series training, which is a whole series of trainings on Lean adjacent topics. So while they're oriented for continuous improvement, the philosophy that you should take away from these tools is we sort of discuss philosophically how to approach the ideas, and then we go into learning about how to use the actual practical tool. So today's topic is visual management. So we're talking about how to use visual management tools, particularly Kanban boards of the sort that are represented best by Trello or Microsoft Planner. And then we'll be talking specifically about how to use Microsoft Planner, which is a very valuable tool. And we're continuing to discover more and interesting ways to use Microsoft Planner. So we'll talk through that tool in some depth. All right, let's go ahead and begin. So first, let's talk about visual management. So visual management is a way of taking the work that we do, especially in the type of office environments that many of us come from, and making it visible. We don't make widgets, right? But we want to be able to track how well we're performing, keeping track of the tasks and projects we have on hand, and taking them effectively from start to finish. So there are a lot of ways that you can do that, one of which is Kanban boards, which we'll be discussing in more detail in a little bit. There are other examples of standard work. Some of these are a little less practical now that we are not in the office anymore, such as visual boards, but there are digital equivalents, which are dashboards. So taking data, pushing it through a visualization platform like Power BI or SSRS and viewing reports. Those are examples of dashboards. Standard work, so posting play-by-plays of how to do individual tasks so that everyone is following the same task. Signs, so these are literally just visual posters. There are digital equivalents of those too, but they don't work as well. So for example, I can't put up a poster on the great Lean continuous improvement projects in the break room anymore. Now I've got to find more effective ways to communicate those. And email, as many of you may know, is not always the best way to get people's attention. We can also post our quality standards. So say things are supposed to be done in a certain amount of time. How often are we meeting those? We get a green dot. Everyone met the permitting time for this project as it's been moving through the process. So there are ways of tracking progress. And these are all different kinds of visual management. But the one main principle behind all forms of visual management is they highlight abnormal conditions so that we can address problems immediately. You don't want to find out 2 months after the fact that a project took way longer or that it had a bunch of errors. The idea is that you can find out while it's happening, after it's done, so that you can work to redress that immediately. And all visual management platforms serve that vital function. So now let's talk about what Kanban is. So Kanban boards are fairly simple, and what it basically boils down to, it's a list of tasks in bins. So Kanban teams, or just groups or teams, write all their projects or work items onto cards. So this is an example. This is a Trello board. It's what I used before I moved over to Microsoft Planner. And you can see I've got a bunch of individual projects. Each one is listed on a card. I have due dates. You can see very easily visually, these are the ones that met their deadlines. These are the ones that are behind. They have little tags. You can see these little colors right here that indicate various statuses. The idea being that you look at this and you immediately see these are the projects I'm working on. This is the status they have. And it communicates that very quickly and effectively, more effectively than written notation. So we're all familiar with doing various kinds of progress reporting. There are times when that dialogue is useful, but there are a lot of times where this format is especially useful. and we'll be talking a lot about the value that Kanban boards can bring to your work. So the key Kanban elements, there's really not a lot to them. As a concept, they're extremely simple. And that's principally we take our tasks, which are on these cards, and we sort them into columns. There's lots of ways that you can do this. By default, though, Kanban boards typically tend to function as a workflow where you progress from left to right, and you can move these cards through as a project works its way through a process. So they can be very simple. So to do, in progress, complete. So it just starts on one, moves to the next as it reaches that next phase, and then immediately, eventually reaches that end. So it's very easy to, at a glance, say, okay, how many projects do we have as to do? So projects that are waiting to be worked on. How many projects do we have that are in progress? And how many projects do we have that are complete? So it can be very simple, or it can be more complex. You can have as many categories as you want. I haven't found a tool that really limits those, but the more you have, the more complex and hard to work with your Kanban board becomes. But because you can name them and format them however you like, you can do a lot of things with these basically categorization tools, these columns. Earlier today, Justin was teaching a couple of green belts. We're going to be using Microsoft Planner as a tool for assessing various ideas and moving them into categories. And what's nice is they can easily move from category to category. So it works from that perspective as well. So where does the value come from on a Kanban board? Because that's great. I can take all these things I have to do that I know I have to do, and I can put them in these bins. So what? So where the value add really comes in is twofold. You can think of it in terms of an individual who's trying to keep track of their tasks, or as a project manager trying to keep track of their projects, or you can look at it as a team trying to compile all of the work that's being done and keeping track of all of it. I know especially for managers, it's tough to know what all your people are working on, and they're probably all working on different things, and it can be a lot of work. And if you're having them send weekly reports or updates or things like that, it's absolutely vital that you know what's going on. And so this can serve as a vital function to keeping what's going on. So first we'll discuss work in progress limits. Work in progress limits are the maximum number of cards that are in a column. If you know how long a task takes, you can figure out how many cards can fit in any individual column. So where it's really great is if your columns represent various phases of a process. You can say, we can only have 4 cards in here at a time. That's the maximum number we can work on because we have 4 people and they're each doing one of these things. And if we have more than that, then they're not working on one of them. And so it's very easy to find bottlenecks, and it's very easy for finding where you're not having effective flow. A lot of times, a lot of our work is generated by waiting and things not being worked on. So it can be really vital to know where things are getting stuck. And visually, it's very easy to look at it and tell. It also allows for the principles of a commitment point and a delivery point. So commitment point is where ideas are picked up, where they're ready to be worked on. And we'll get into push versus pull in a little bit, but it's the idea that there's a pool of work waiting. There's always a pool of work waiting. I don't know anyone in state government that's sitting around with nothing they could be working on. But cataloging that work and having it ready so that when you are ready, when you have the capacity, you can pull it on, and it helps you keep track of all that work that you can't even commit to. That is just would be nice to get to eventually, but we're just not there yet. And the other is the delivery point. So the delivery point is we're done. It's out the door. It's good. Your goal should be to move things from the commitment point, so when work begins, to delivery point as quickly as possible. And Kanban boards make it possible to track that progress. So There are 8 key things that I want to highlight that are benefits of Kanban boards. Forgive me if it sounds like I am going into depth on this, but I really do believe that Kanban boards can help revolutionize the way we do business and manage teams. So I really want to go into depth about all the advantages that they can bring. So I've already mentioned that it instantly allows you to see how tasks are moving through the process. So one is it's a visual management board. So ideally, you can incorporate some kind of lean management structure, and I'm happy to talk to any managers that are looking at bringing this on, but it involves daily or more frequent, shorter meetings. You don't have to have big, long staff meetings because you can look at the board and see these are all the projects we're doing. You can look at the cards and see what the status of all of those are. So it's not about, well, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? It's I can see from your board that something's not working right. Can you talk to me about what's getting in the way of this moving on? We're talking about obstructions and areas of assistance that can be provided instead of tedious updates of, well, I'm working on this task with so and so. We talked about it last week, but I'll remind you again. It gets that work going a lot faster. It gives you a lot of information that helps you decide the direction as far as the strategic priority. So when you have a bunch of tasks piled up in the to-do list that haven't entered the pipeline, you can have strategic decisions about like, why are these things sitting here? They should be moving through. These are priorities. And with the work in progress limits, you could say, okay, we don't have capacity to do it. So what are we going to take off that list to make room for that? And those are really hard conversations to have, but they're really vital conversations to have if we're talking about a true shift in strategic priorities. All team members are encouraged to work together and improve current processes. So I'm not just seeing my tasks. If I'm doing this with a team, I'm seeing everybody's tasks. So maybe I have some extra capacity and I could help out on something, but I wouldn't know that if we weren't all working on the same visual management board. Or, I can see what somebody else is working on and say, oh, this project that I'm working on has something that could help the project you're working on, or vice versa. There's a lot of opportunities for sharing in this visual platform that immediately draws your attention versus having to read a written description. And ideally, if this is working as intended, a potential elimination of updated reporting. So if I'm keeping track of my projects on my Kanban board, my manager can look at that and go, these are John's projects. These are the statuses of those projects. So I don't have to go in and again say, here's what's happening, here's our progress. It's all in one time go. Everyone knows what's going on. So it also allows for incremental efficiency gains. So it really helps you understand flow and the way the work is progressing through there, as well as your staff limits. Or your personal limits. I only have so many lean projects I can work on at a time. If you go onto my lean website, I've got some 36 continuous improvement ideas sitting there waiting to be worked on. I can't work on all of them, and a lot of my priorities have shifted since the COVID outbreak. And as a consequence, I know that there's some stuff that I can't work on, but I can see how quickly things are moving through and know where things are getting stuck. It's implementation, in case you were wondering. So visualizing your process helps highlight those areas where things aren't working well, and it gives you targeted questions to ask. Why are we getting, like, do we need added capacity, or do we need to shift capacity around? It opens up all these interesting questions that otherwise we wouldn't have even thought to ask. So bottlenecks, stalled tasks, too much work in progress, all clearly visible. One of the important things, and this happens a lot with projects in state government, is that we're really good at starting projects and we have a lot of trouble finishing them. Kanban helps get us focused on finishing that work, because if you say, we're here on the second stage of this process and we can only have 4 tasks in this step, then we have to move it. We have to move one out before we can move another one on. So we're not starting a dozen projects and finishing one or two. We're starting one, we're finishing one. We're starting one to finishing one. And that has a big impact on customer experience because it's talking about how long is their experience going to be? How long does it take for them to get a permit from start to finish? They don't care about the 30 other permits you have. They want theirs to go fast. This brings that orientation more in line with their expectations. So Kanban boards allow us to track cycle time and throughput. Cycle time is how long it takes for a task to move through the process, like what I just talked about. Throughput measures how many tasks are being delivered during a certain time period. So there's a lot of ideas of seasonality of things that may or may not represent reality. We can see it happen in live environments on Kanban. So if we are finishing 30 tasks a month, some months, and other months we're finishing 5 because this is particularly a problem in A&R. People are out in the field, like doing other stuff. And it's all vital, but it means that we're doing fewer of them. And with a Kanban board workflow, we can try and deal with that inequity and come up with plans for how to deal with that inequity because it is very clear that things are getting stuck on a very specific area. So we can help clear up those bottlenecks. So one of the primary reoccurring themes that appears often in the employee engagement survey and a lot of different areas is, I have too much to do. I cannot keep track of it all. There's just too much. And managers oftentimes are at a loss. Like, I don't know how to help these people. I don't know what they're getting stuck on. I don't know how long these things take. Kanban boards can help visualize that burden so that we can ask the right questions to make things better. So it suggests the implementation of a pull system. So a lot of times in state government, we work on what's called a push system, which is we have no control of when things come in. They just come to us, and then we deal with them as best we can. And sometimes that means things get piled up, and we throw up our hands and say, I'll get to it when I get to it. So one of the things that is a principle in Lean and is visualized very well in Kanban boards is the idea of a pull system, which is you take the tasks when you have the capacity to deal with them. And right now, without using a Kanban system, without having these regular check-ins, getting past obstructions and challenges, we don't know when our capacity exists. And we just all feel like there's so much going on that's impossible to keep track of it all. Kanban boards can help us understand that. It can help our managers understand our plights. It can help us understand our own burdens and where things are getting stuck. It's a really powerful tool for capitalizing on that work in progress limit so that no new tasks are moving in. They're not piling up on our desk. We take them when we're ready. And that gets things moving along quickly because we're prioritizing finishing over starting. It can help individuals and teams from that perspective. So it can really increase team focus. So I know some people feel like they're very isolated from their teams. They don't know what other people on their team are doing. They don't know how their work fits together. Kanban boards can help on that stuff. And it can also help you as an individual focus on avoiding context switching. So I think all of you have had an experience of you're working on something, you're kind of in a flow, you get an email, and then you check the email, and that email ends up taking 20 minutes, but you end up losing an hour, right? Even though that email only took you 20 minutes, you had to switch from that thing you were doing to the email and the work that entails, and then you go back to your thing, but you somehow lost an hour. It's really inefficient. So one of the things about doing a Kanban board is it allows us to group similar tasks so we maintain that flow. Keep working there. So, I mean, there are estimates that context switching can cost up to 5 to 30 minutes of wasted time per task. Obviously, varies depending on the complexity of the task, but this is not 5 to 30 minutes to do the task. This is just time lost getting your head around the work again. So it can be very useful to keep track of this with a Kanban board. We could talk about reducing waste. So I've alluded to this several times in this training. but most of the time spent, for example, on permitting when it comes to the Agency of Natural Resources, most of the time our permits are being worked on is not time that is actually being spent processing a permit. It is time that the permit is spent sitting on somebody's desk so that they can get to it, whether that be a signature, whether that be just a huge burden of permits just waiting to get done. And you're working on them as fast as you can and you're trying to get them done, but there's just so many. And you just have to keep working on them and working on them, working on them. And it's just sitting on your desk and you have other priorities. And it's a lot to keep track of and it's not easy. Kanban boards can help simplify that and can highlight when there's trouble. I know that a lot of projects come in on a seasonal basis or all at once. Kanban boards can help visualize that and say, I need a surge in resources, I need a surge in support. And it really provides the opportunity for managers to be in a position to see that that support is needed and provide that support. And for staff, it says, oh man, like I can look at this board and I can see the kind of workload that I've got coming up and how I need to handle it. So I better get around planning on how to do that work. So the other nice thing is that it's fairly flexible. I know it seems like it's kind of like a rigid adherence to these categories, but it's about not about individual tasks being completed, but about these gates being passed. So how you get to that gate, there's a lot of room there. You don't want to, when you're building your Kanban board, build each individual task as a list, but rather you want to try and group tasks by the type of work that's being done. So it allows transparency because other people can see what phase of the task you're in. But it also has a lot of flexibility in terms of like, I know I've got this much time to clear this gate. Let's talk about how I can make improvements in that space to get things through that gate more efficiently. And the other advantage is that it's more predictable. So it's basically a visual way of representing standard work. Tasks are being pulled in should be roughly equivalent to tasks leaving if you're using a pull system, if you're using work in process limits. So it allows you to make sure you're maintaining that workflow at a steady basis so that one permit doesn't take 15 days, another one takes 95 days if they are roughly of equivalent complexity, right? Because they're going through these gates, you can see how much work there is to be done, and you can plan around that. So those are the benefits of Kanban. I'm ready to hop into the demo now, but I want to pause to see if there are any questions about why Kanban. I'm sure I threw a lot of stuff at you. A lot of it was a little bit redundant, but I really wanted to hammer home that it represents huge potential for improvement. So feel free to raise your hands or type a comment in the chat. I'll give you guys a minute and we'll head over to the demo. What does Kanban mean? So like a lot of these terms, it originates in Japanese. I'm not sure what Kanban itself means. That is something I should have looked up. So I apologize for that. Maria.
Hey, I wanted to say I was taking a couple of high, notes here, high-level notes, and one of the things that did capture me was what you said was it's important to keep track of what we're doing because, especially with the Kanban board, it helps us because what's in progress, and once that's reached, we don't add new tasks until something falls off, and that's critical for us. So I was thinking about, okay, great, this would be great for us and our team and how we move forward with our projects because we have so much in the air. We're always managing so many things. Do you suggest that we do our own Kanban boards on our own, or do we do it as a team initially and then get that started? Because I know that'll be the heavy lifting of all of us coming together and saying, this is what's on my plate, let's add these projects, this is what's on my plate, how do we start that?
Sorry, you cut out a little bit. Were you asking a question at the end there, or were you just saying that you're looking forward to?
I was asking a question like, how do we as a team get started with our own Kanban board so we can put all of our projects in the Kanban board so we can look at them together?
Sure.
Because I could do my own.
Yeah. Well, why don't I go ahead and walk through how to build one, and I'll sort of we'll talk a little bit about how to grab tasks and bring them in. All right. And Lynette shared a link about Kanban too. Thank you very much. That's very helpful. The lean world is littered with a lot of Japanese phraseology. So I'm aware it can be very imposing. So yeah, Kanban, Justin posted, means signboard. Can particular tasks be linked to an Outlook calendar event and also be assigned to a unique team of people? We'll be talking about that. Okay. All right. So what you're looking at right now is my Lean Projects Kanban board. This is the board that I use that's currently posted on, if you are in the Department of Environmental Conservation and you go to Process Improvements subchannel, it's one of the tabs on that subchannel. We'll be talking a little bit more about how you can do that. But what that basically represents is the work that I do. All the work that I do is basically on this Kanban board. It's how I keep track of my work, and it's how you can keep track of your work too. So I don't necessarily use the standard signposts like to do, in progress, complete, but we'll be talking through it a little bit. This is Microsoft Planner. There's a couple of ways to view Microsoft Planner. So if you go to any Office 365 product and you click these 9 dots here, you can find apps. Planner is one of those tasks. You may have to hit all apps to make it show up. Yeah, I can zoom in a little bit. Hopefully that's a little bit easier to read. So you can view your apps over here on the left side. Planner is right here. You may have to click all apps for it to appear and scroll down until you find it. You can also view it on Microsoft Teams, and I'll be talking a little bit more about its integration with Microsoft Teams in a little bit. But for now, let's focus on the web-based platform. So you'll notice a couple of things. First, there's this control along the left-hand side, which highlights a bunch of recent plans that I've viewed. But the big things right here are the new plan, the Planner Hub, and my tasks. So if you want to create a new plan, you can go ahead and hit new plan right here on the top. It'll prompt you a name for that plan. So I'll go ahead and create a new board right here. What is interesting and sometimes frustrating about Microsoft Planner is that it can only be tied to a team. You have to be a part of a group for it to work. So it will prompt you to pick the group that you want to add this work to. Now, just because you're adding this to a group doesn't necessarily mean that everyone can look at it, but it does have to live in a group, which means it lives in a team. Yeah. So Karen makes an excellent point. Kanban boards are a very practical tool in the project management community. So if you've ever done any project management, you've probably seen a Kanban board or two. It's almost a Gantt chart. It's very useful for tracking projects, and you will have to get used to it. It does take some work and some getting used to. It's not, you won't just hop right on and immediately find all those improvements that I highlighted earlier. So excellent point, Karen. So I'm going to go ahead and choose a group for my plan. I'm going to go ahead and grab the A&R Lean Green Belts, just because they're my guinea pigs. All right, so I clicked on them. It adds to that group, and now I can go ahead and create a plan. So this is what a blank board looks like. This is what you'll be met with when you decide to move to a Kanban system, and you'll see that there's a to-do bucket that it creates by default. We can go ahead and click on the ellipses right here, and we can rename that to whatever we want. We don't need it to do one if we don't want one. And to add tasks, all you have to do is click Add Task. And I'm going to say Visual Management Training, and I'll spell it wrong because I'm typing in front of an audience. And then I'm going to go ahead and set a due date. Well, I'm doing that today, so I'm going to go ahead and mark off today. And then where Microsoft Planner comes in really, really handy is this Assign button. So what's great about the Assign button is it links to Office 365. So if I hit Assign, I can grab anyone in the organization. So I could say, hey, Justin, this is your job now. But it's not Justin's job, it's my job now. So I'm going to type my name. I could grab any other Searses. Ooh, Erica Sears is new. I can click to add my name. And then if that looks good, I can hit Add Task. By default, it'll start creating another one. But it creates a card. Just like we talked about Kanban boards, it creates a card that is in this bin. But I don't want this in the to-do category. So I want to create a new category, which let's say this is give training, and this bucket is need to upload. So after this training is done and recorded, I'm going to go ahead and upload it to Microsoft Stream so that everyone can watch it. If you haven't checked out my channel, which is the Lean Learning Series, Justin also has one called the Productivity Lab. It's pretty good, but not as good as mine. Head on over to the Lean Learning Series. You can check out this training and a bunch of other trainings that are roughly an hour. They all touch on topics that are that are roughly equivalent to this training. So they cover topics and stuff that are adjacent to Lean, but not necessarily about Lean. Go ahead and check them out. All right, so I need to upload them. So after this training is done, I can just grab this task and drag it over. And if I want to say advertise, add that in another bin, I can go ahead and add that. Oh, that was weird. I can go ahead and, oh, that's because it jumped over because I was zoomed in. So I'm just going to zoom out a little bit so all three can be there. And you can see it's very easy to move the tasks between the two. If I finish the task, it's very easy to just click this little check mark. That's the easiest way to mark a task complete. So it's also very useful for lots of people to collaborate. So if I had assigned this to somebody else and I wanted to know when it was done, all they'd have to do is come in and go, done. It even did the little starburst letting you know that it's done and completed. This project is not done, but it tells you when the task was completed, who it was completed by. But we're not done with this task because there's a lot more that you can do with this card. So you can hit this ellipses and you can provide various labels. Labels are custom to each individual plan. And when we go back to the Lean projects, I'll sort of show you what some of those can look like. We can assign more people to the task. Whoops, jumped the gun a little bit. You can copy the task. So if you have, yeah, Justin, you have more subscribers. If you want to fix that, you can go to Microsoft Stream and yeah, that's a great point. I will go ahead and toss my link in the chat. All right, head over there, subscribe. Subscribing doesn't really do anything except that Justin and I are competing to see who has the most popular channel on stream. We can copy a link to tasks. So if I assign someone to a task and I want them to see the information that's present in there, I can go ahead and copy that link and send it over. You can move task. You can pick the bucket that you want to move it into if you're not a fan of the dragging, or you can delete the task. So if I don't want to mark this thing complete because it wasn't complete, but I don't want it on my plan anymore, I can delete it. If you click on a card after it's been created, because you have to create it first and then you can click on it, you'll see we have many of those same things. So here are the labels. We can go ahead and say pink is need help. And I can just go ahead and create that label. And now I can go ahead and add that label whenever I need help on a thing. There are not status percentages. Your only options are not started, in progress, or completed. It's worth mentioning that Microsoft Planner is a very bare bones Kanban tool. There are much more complex tools out there if you need to do more robust project management. This is entry level. This is very beginner stuff. If you need more complexity in tools, they are out there. I'm not going to go into them today. We have access to some of the very most complex project management tools in existence through part of our Office 365 accounts, but I'm not going to talk about those today because the main principle today is simple Kanban. We can assign priorities. So by default, everything is assigned a medium, but we can assign important, urgent, or low, just like we can with emails. We can select start dates and due dates. We can add notes. So you can type as much in here as you want. You can add checklist items. So if a particular project has these different work items that need to be done, so visual management training, so I need to create the presentation, I need to give presentation, I need to archive. I created the presentation, so I can mark that as done. You can choose whether to toggle that on or off on the card itself, so you can see that those things show up here that have to be done. So if we do one, we don't have to go into the card. We can just say give presentation, because I'm doing that right now. You can add attachments. It's really, really great for attaching documents relevant to a project to the card. So if you need to find them again, you can. There are also comments. I do not recommend that you use comments. They are very highly functional, but the problem is they will email everyone in the group that you have put a comment on them, which is, I imagine, useful for somebody, but in most cases, I do not want to send everyone in DEC an email that I have updated a task on Planner. Yes, Katie Bartona said she emailed the whole division before. Yeah, I have. So I don't have email permissions for the entirety of DEC, which actually works out to my favor because I can actually do comments because it will block those emails that try to go out. But generally speaking, unless you're in a unique situation like that, just avoid the comments. I think Microsoft is working on it. Justin, if you can confirm, so that we don't have to do that every time, so that we can actually use the comments so that multiple people can provide their comments on there. Just don't use the comments. Avoid using the comments. It can be dangerous. Kay, I see your hands up.
Yeah, I don't know if the email everybody thing is true for everybody, for everyone's team, because it's we're in our little area in data management and asset management, we have to add our comments and describe all the work we've done for our planner, and we always have to add our comments, and I've never received an email, so I'm not sure how that works, if maybe there's a Power Automate thing running.
Yeah, that's a great point. I have noticed it works for some teams and not others. I think there might be an IT setting, maybe relating to groups, that has an impact.
Yeah.
But because we don't touch the groups stuff, it's really unclear to me exactly what controls that factor.
Yeah, I'm not sure where that control is either.
Okay, thanks, Kay.
Mm-hmm.
So until we get some clarity on that, I would recommend avoiding comments if at all possible. So let's go ahead and take a look at my Kanban board. So you see right here, I've got a list of active projects. Those are the things that I'm actively working on that are lean priorities and project types where I'm doing lean work. A lot of my lean work turns into a project implementation. So I track those over here. And I'm doing something really cool with those where if I have time, I will talk to you about. I'm working on a large end form development project, which has a lot of different forms. So I'm working with a lot of different stakeholders. You can see I've listed off each of those projects here. I've listed off the project owners and the people that I'm working with on those projects, so it makes it really easy to know who I have to consult when I take steps there. I'm keeping track of all my coaching here. I've got a couple of projects that are on hold, so those are projects that we started but are not actively being worked on. I've got my proposed projects. The reason they're over on the right instead of the left is because I want them sort of off screen. I do most of my work in these bins. And then I've got a spot here for quarterly updates. I actually don't update the quarterly update one. That's something I built in Power Automate. So you'll notice up at the top, there are actually 3 things listed here. There's board, charts, and schedule. So if we go ahead and click on charts, it'll give you a dashboard of all of your projects. So it breaks down the status of all of your projects. So 28 that I have not indicated that I've started, 4 that are in progress, 7 that are late, 13 that are completed. It breaks them down by category or bucket, as Microsoft Planner refers to them. And so I can see the breakdown of each of these. And so when we talk about being able to see where our work clutters up and work in progress limits, you can see my active projects form the majority of the work that I'm doing, which makes sense because I have to give those the most attention. And then I've got a number of them that are not started. Linda says, is it possible to use Planner as a personal workload manager or even as a practice sandbox not tied to an existing plan? So I do that. That's what this is. It's not really tied to any particular, it is tied to a plan because that is unavoidable. You have to connect it to a group. But I find that aside from the pesky thing of potentially accidentally emailing the entire group, as long as you don't touch the comments, it's fine. So it can also break them down by priority, and it also breaks down by members. So if you are a team leader, you can take a look at your team and say, okay, so-and-so is on this status, how it looks down here. Yeah, and Justin added to Linda that Microsoft To Do is another Microsoft platform tool that is coming. It kind of takes on the best of both worlds in terms of Microsoft Planner and Outlook tasks. So that's something to look forward to. So you can see here, I can easily look down and see all those members and their tasks. The schedule is a calendar, so it takes all the start and finish tasks. And let me zoom out a little bit so it looks, yeah. So you can see where things are underway, so you can tell if you've got a deadline coming up. When you're looking at this, it can be a bit overwhelming if you have a lot of stuff going on. So you can go ahead and sort by members. You can go ahead and you can filter these groups. So if I just want to know what are the things that I have that are late, I can go ahead and filter that, or things that are due today. I don't have anything that's due today. I can check what's due next week. I have IA inspection, maintenance and inspection form that I need to work on, and doing some work on Arlene too. So it's a really great way of searching your own tasks, especially if you've got a lot going on. You can also group by bucket. By default, you can change the grouping. So if I want to group by assigned to, I can look at all the, let me take the filter off. Okay, so now we're looking at everything. So I grouped it by assigned to, so I can look at everything that's due for me, everything with Ed, Kristen, Beth. I can go ahead and group by progress, so I can look at everything not started and progress completed. I can sort by due date, labels. So I've used some labels right here. I've got pink, which is I have a check-in scheduled. I have a reporting needed tab, a reporting complete, a final reporting. I've got a follow-up one that I use a lot, which is that I need to email those people and talk to them about stuff. So there's a lot of ways that you can customize this view to look at things the way you need to look at them. So think of it in terms of you're putting data in a database. but you can then visualize it how you need to in order to get your work done. Or your manager can look at it and figure out how to sort their people or customize that exactly how they need. You can also go over here to my tasks, and it will list off the things that you have been associated with. By default, it lists those by in progress, but you can also list them by plan. So if you have 6 different plans, you can still look here and see all of them. Sometime soon, probably within the next month or two, we will also be in Microsoft Planner will be integrating with Outlook tasks. So hopefully there's nothing rough on my email, but if you've never noticed it down here, there are tasks that you can keep track of down here. Pretty soon, things that are marked as to do in Planner will show up here. Right now, it's just things that you manually mark down. Okay. There's also the Planner Hub, which kind of gives you an overview of all the plans that you're a part of. So Jordan asks, do you find it difficult to use Planner if people you work with don't actively use Planner as well for assigning tasks, etc.? So I find a lot of value in using Microsoft Planner to track my own tasks. I do not know how else I would do it. I started using Trello basically right after I came into this position. For those of you that don't know, my predecessor in this job was Justin Kenny. He left me 20-ish projects in active implementation, and I was new to the position, so I didn't know much about those 20 projects that were going on. But the first thing I did was I took each of those 20 tasks, put them on a card, and then I was able to keep track of them and keep track of what was going on with all those projects. So it was a really great way to gain familiarity with those tasks, figure out what was going on with them, and keep them all straight in my head, because I couldn't keep them all straight in my head with nothing to look at or nothing to understand. And it was a really great way of telling me what phase they were in and who I had given quarterly updates for and who I still needed to schedule. And it really helped me keep track of all those things in a way I never would have been able to do without that. So that was where my journey with Kanban boards began. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the unique advantages to doing this work in Planner versus using a Trello board or something else like that. So the first, as you already saw, was that I can grab people. I've got the full list of people, and I can assign individual people to tasks. And it connects to those people, so I can get their emails and all their contact information. It's much more convenient than just having to type in a name on Trello, and like, it doesn't mean anything. It's not connected to anything. Here it is. But where a lot of the advantages come in are in the Office 365 compatibility. So if I go ahead and I go to a team, and I go to the A&R Lean Greenbelts, and I want to take one of my Planner tasks and upload it here. So I've actually already got one, but if I want to add a task, it's as easy as clicking the plus sign to add a tab if you're an owner of a team, and click Planner. When you do that, it will take a second to load, and you can choose whether or not to post about it to the channel about the new tab. I tend to uncheck it. We got to give it a second to connect to Planner. There it is. It prompts us to create a new plan or use an existing one. I'm going to go ahead and use that existing one I already created, but you can create a new one. So I can go ahead and grab that training one. Hit save. And in a second or two, it will load up with that plan. So it's very much in line with Microsoft Teams and the intent of it being a one-stop shop for a team and the work that they're doing. So you can see right off the bat, it looks pretty much the same. It's missing a lot of the stuff on the left-hand side because it's about the team, not the individual. But it's the same way you can add a task. You can view the exact same charts. You can view the exact same schedule. It's the exact same functionality as you have within the tool, except that it's accessible here. I want to leave plenty of time for questions, but I do want to highlight one really cool thing that you can only do with Planner, and you would never be able to dream of doing this in Trello. Planner cannot generate a Gantt chart. I do not know why it can't generate a Gantt chart, considering if you use the task tracker in SharePoint, it can generate a Gantt chart. When I mentioned that Planner is a very limited tool, I mean it is a very limited way to do that. So Amy asked if there's a way to dock Planner in the left bar. Yes, you absolutely can. You can just go ahead and click on the ellipses down there, click on Planner, and fingers crossed that it doesn't die on me. There it is. So now we've got Planner. By default, it sorts by all my tasks. I can look at recent plans. So jump into that one. It will take me right to that tab because it's a very specific planner view that it views there. Okay, so the really cool thing. One of the really great things, and I'm going to go ahead and, whoops, nope, I shouldn't have made that a link. There it is. Sorry, my computer's acting a little bit slow today. Is that its ability to work with Power Automate. So, for instance, we saw here that I have a bunch of tasks listed in implementation. I have set up a Power Automate script, Power Automate, which used to be Microsoft Flow, Power Automate to automatically look at all of the tasks in implementation, copy all of those tasks over to quarterly updates, send an email to the people that are assigned to the tasks with a link to a SharePoint list which was created for each of these items to provide their quarterly updates to me. And then it will send follow-up emails 15 days later and then at the end of the month with the same link to that same SharePoint site. When they update that SharePoint list with their update, it will mark their status as complete. So I know just by looking at Microsoft Planner if that they have been sent the email because it shows up in this quarterly updates list. And I know when they've done their update because it shows up here as completed. So I do not have to email them and ask them to do their quarterly update. It automatically does that 3 times over. I do not have to pick those individuals because I've already assigned them, so it already knows who to email. It sends them the automatic link, and I know when they've done it because it will show up as done. And all of that's without me having to touch anything. Power Automate is extremely powerful, and you cannot, we cannot in the government client touch Trello, although maybe we can. That stuff keeps changing. But we do a lot of stuff with emailing and being attached to their individual accounts that we wouldn't be able to access through Trello. That's really only doable through Microsoft Planner. All right, that was a lot of stuff to throw at you. We got 5 minutes left. I want to go ahead and open things up to questions. I've seen a lot of questions getting answered in the chat. If there are any that haven't been answered, feel free to post them again or raise your hand and I'll call on you and can ask some follow-up questions. And hopefully, Maria, that answered your question about how to add projects. All right. Amy, go for it.
I've got one about dates completing a task. Since I don't have everything into Planner yet, I don't always go over as often as I should. And sometimes I'll realize there's a task that I have finished and I go in and check it off later. But I think it automatically puts in the date completed as the day that I'm checking that off. So I don't know if there's any way to get around that. Most of the time it doesn't matter because the important thing is just tracking that it's done. But I don't know if it would matter for any other analyses.
Yeah, I don't know of any way to export data out of Microsoft Planner because that would be really useful for doing the kind of work in process analysis, workload planning, workload balancing types of efforts that we discussed. Kay, I expect you have an insight on that?
Yeah, you can, when you're setting completed manually on these tasks, you can tell it what day it was completed. Even though if it's like a week later, you can go back to the day it was completed. When you hit the completed part as a choice, it allows you to put the date that completion happened. So if you double click on one of your tasks, this one, or like right now, just go ahead and say, instead of saying due date 10/31, like let's pretend it was actually done a week earlier. You can go ahead and say it was done on whatever day it was actually completed. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And then it's stored as completed on that day by the due date. Like when you go back and you say progress says not started, if you say completed, then your due date, like say it was done not on 10/31, but it was done, if you just hit the little calendar, that's where you can change the date.
I don't see it for completed status.
No, where you have the due date, it's instead of the due date being the 31st, you could say it was completed, on the 19th.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's a way to track that, I guess, if
yeah.
you really need to. All right, so a couple of words on Power Automate. Power Automate is part of the Power Platform, which comprises Power Automate, Power BI, and Power Apps. They're basically a citizen developer platform for Office 365 products, is the best way to think of it. So it's basically programming for people who aren't programming to have things touch various Office products. So like basically integrating things in Outlook. So for example, when I get attachments in my email, I have a Power Automate script which automatically saves those attachments to a special folder in my OneDrive. So I don't have to keep emails just for their attachments anymore. So I know that I automatically have them. It's basically, if you have something happening in one part of Office 365 and you want to do something in another part of Office 365, you can use Power Automate to make it do that for you automatically. Either via unique triggers like receiving an email or creating a task or submitting a form, or on a timer like my automatic emails about quarterly updates, or at the press of a button, and it will run those various tasks. I think we have I think I have an introduction to Power Automate, which should be around here somewhere. Intro to Power Automate. Yeah. Go ahead and toss that into the chat. So all the more reason to go ahead and check out this and the rest of my trainings on Microsoft Stream. So Access is not something supported by Microsoft anymore. We're all better off pretending Access doesn't exist, which is unfortunate and weird, but let's hope that more products don't go the way of Access. All right, I want to thank everyone for their time. I want to encourage everyone to check out this training. Well, to share this training once it goes up on Microsoft Stream. Check out my other trainings on Microsoft Stream. Check out Justin's training on Microsoft Stream. Again, it's very, very good. I have another training coming up on a different topic. So Tuesday the 10th, we're doing online facilitation platforms and tools. So it'll be talking through a lot of the things we're teaching the current green belts and new green belts about how to still be functional green belts and use lean tools in an online environment. So I've got to run to another meeting. I'm sure many of you do too. So thank you all so much for your time, and you all have a great day. Great talking to you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.